Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. Chapter 7. I was in love with Adrian. I could hardly believe it. I had tried so hard to stay guarded, to keep my heart locked away. Yet here I was, thinking about him until my chest hurt. I came into this relationship with my eyes open, telling myself I wouldn't let myself fall again after Laken. Apparently that plan lasted as long as a whisper in the wind. With a sigh, I ran a hand through my hair and gripped the steering wheel. When had my feelings shifted from simple care to something deeper, something steady and all-consuming? How had I not noticed until now? Seeing Adrian smile, the morning I left his place had only made things worse. He looked genuinely happy, and despite myself my heart did a small, traitorous flutter. It was part of the package. When he was happy, I felt lighter too. I should have realized sooner. Now that I thought back, the signs had been there for months. I just refused to see them. Seeing him with someone else removed the last of my illusions. I felt exposed and, truthfully, terrified. I didn't know how I'd survive another heartbreak. If Adrian left, or if something happened to him, I had no plan for how to cope. That fear was the reason I had promised myself never to love again. I took a deep breath and forced myself to focus on the road. Today I had a mission to start. No more dwelling on the man waiting at home, no more worrying about my fragile heart. My agency contact had dropped off a new file, and this one required me to be out of town. If the report was accurate, and I had every reason to believe it was, I'd be gone at least a week. The thought of being away from Adrian made my chest ache. Before I realized I loved him, he hadn't been on my mind so often. I didn't miss him the way I did now. I replayed little moments, the way he laughed, the way he reached for my hand, and felt my hands tighten on the wheel. What made everything worse was that I didn't fully trust him. There were days when he did things that made me want to walk away or, worse, take matters into my own hands. Neither option appealed. Maybe I could walk away now while I still had some control. But thinking about ending things sent a sharp sting through my chest. I was terrified and confused, and I had no clear answer: stay and risk my heart, or leave and regret it forever. Adrian's POV. So, he told you he loved you? Just like that? My brother Scotty's eyes widened in disbelief. What happened to the other night? I laughed. No, he didn't say it straight out. We both just realized it. I tried to explain, but Scotty's raised eyebrow told me he didn't quite get it. I glanced at Marcus for backup, but Marcus lay on the office couch, staring at the ceiling with a scowl. He'd been like that ever since I'd made my announcement. We all knew he disliked Lucas. His mood came as no surprise. I can't really explain it, I said. Just trust me, he loves me, I love him, and I've never been happier. Scotty studied me for a long moment, then shrugged and turned away. I'm going to ask him to move in with me, I added, and Marcus cursed from where he lay. Can we get on with this meeting, please? Marcus demanded. It sounded less like a question and more like an order. He wore a frown I didn't like, but nothing could dampen my mood today. I'd been counting the minutes until I could ask Lucas to stay with me. He'd been gone for over a week and I missed him terribly. I promised myself I wouldn't hesitate the moment he returned. I cleared my mind and took my place behind the desk. All right, break it down for me, I said, shifting into business mode and wiping the smile from my face. Marcus spoke first. The wolves are getting careless. A few of the head dealers in the States claim 2 of our guys were attacked by a werewolf. They're calling it hallucination from the high, but we know better. How reckless can they get showing themselves to humans? It was dangerous. If humans learned about werewolves, it could threaten all of us. We can't do much about that right now, I said. Hopefully they handle it on their end. How's production? One guy's dead, but production and distribution are still running, Marcus reported. Scotty looked suddenly small and anxious. I didn't have to ask why. I'll get it done, I swear, he said, hands lifted as if to shield himself from Marcus's glare. Marcus growled. We gave you one assignment. What? Why isn't it done? Marcus demanded. This girl, Scotty said quietly, eyes dropping. A girl. Marcus barked. Jesus. Looks like this whole operation's going to fall apart because you two can't keep your eyes forward. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Just the other day you said there aren't any worth your time. What changed? Marcus pressed. Who is she? Why do you want to know? Scotty blurted, then caved under Marcus's stare. It doesn't matter. We didn't work out anyway. When Marcus opened his mouth to press further, I raised a hand to stop him. It's fine. When will you have it done? I asked. Scotty relaxed visibly. A week, maybe, he began, then, feeling Marcus's glare, corrected himself. No, 3 days. Maybe 4. I nodded. Scotty wasn't weak. I'd seen him take on men twice his size. He just disliked letting us down, and Marcus commanded an intimidation few could match. I, however, had little patience for temper tantrums. What else? I asked. I'm getting rid of Jerry. This is the second time his delivery has come up short. I think he's stealing from us, Marcus said. But I liked Jerry, Scotty protested. We ignored him. Attachments could get you killed in our line of work. Start with a warning, that doesn't work, then follow through, I told Marcus. He didn't like the answer, but he stayed silent. When I ran things, no one questioned the strategy. I'm thinking of opening a few legitimate businesses. Restaurants, mainly. We want legit operations to overshadow the rest. Keep things under the radar. No detective can prove anything beyond hearsay, let's keep it that way. You mean you're shelving the expansion into the drug trade? Marcus asked, narrowing his eyes. I nodded. We were doing fine. Greed gets people caught. Expanding would mean more hires, more risk. My organization worked because I didn't leave a paper trail. My main man handled hiring and orders. Beyond my name, most people had no direct link to me. Getting to me would be next to impossible. Adrian, think about what you're saying. We planned this for months, Marcus began, but he was cut off when the door to my office suddenly flew open. We all turned toward the interruption. Lucas's POV. I couldn't believe it. Shock didn't cover it. I felt hollow and furious all at once after what Carson had told me a few hours earlier. I'd abandoned the mission halfway through and rushed back as fast as I could. Right now, I wanted to tear someone apart. I burst into Adrian's study and shoved past the guards who tried to block me. One grabbed my arm, the other planted himself in front of me like he owned the room. Before I could react, the man behind the large mahogany desk spoke, and the guards released me and stepped back. Let him go, Adrian said. His voice was calm. He settled straighter in his chair and regarded me with a single lifted eyebrow. What game are you playing at, Corsetti? I demanded, my anger radiating from me in waves. He merely arched an eyebrow, as if my fury were entertaining. Really, Lucas? Back to last names after everything? He replied, amusement skimming his tone. The sight of him sitting there, smiling after what had happened, made something cold settle in my chest. Cut the act. How could you? My voice rose. My hands were clenched into fists at my sides. The smile slipped. Adrian pushed away from his desk and walked to stand just inches from me. Up close, he looked dangerous rather than vulnerable. Are you going to tell me exactly what you're accusing me of, or am I supposed to guess? He asked, serious now. I inhaled, trying to steady myself, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside. I just got a call from Carson, I said, watching his face for any sign of guilt. He stared back blankly. You don't have anything to say? I pressed. Am I supposed to know who this Carson is? He asked, impatient. My eyes narrowed. He's Lakin's mate, I said tightly. He called to tell me some of your men have been messing with members of Lakin's pack. One of them shot the beta a few weeks ago. I seethed. It took everything in me not to reach out and throttle him. That pack was as close to family as I had. Anyone who harmed them had crossed me. Adrian shook his head, folding his arms. It's always about Lakin, isn't it? Every time I turn around, you're texting him, emailing him. Now this. His voice went low and dangerous. He was clearly irritated, but I refused to back down. So, you don't deny it then? You sent your men after them because… Stop right there, he cut in sharply. Get your facts straight before you start throwing accusations. If your werewolf friends got into it with my men, they brought it on themselves. I don't have time to go around ordering hits on reckless werewolves. I bristled. Fine. Maybe you didn't order it yourself, but it's still your responsibility. Carson took down 3 of them, and now the rest will come after them. Call off your men. I told you from the start what my world is, Adrian shot back. My men do as they please so long as they handle my business. If they tangled with the wolves, it's because the wolves interfered with my operations. I'm not about to jeopardize everything I've built because some packs won't keep to themselves. His neck strained as he glared down at me. I could tell he was close to losing it. I let out a bitter laugh that sounded nothing like amusement. I locked eyes with him and said, "We're done." The words landed hard. His hands dropped to his sides and his expression changed from anger to a tight uncertainty. You're ending this over that? Lucas, they started it. I can't have people messing with my trade. You interfere and you put yourself at risk. He wasn't pleading so much as trying to persuade me to see things his way. I shook my head. I knew this would be a mistake. You're a criminal. I should have walked away. You knew what you were getting into, he replied, frustrated. You were fine with it, and now as soon as things get difficult, you want to bail? He took a step toward me, and for a moment I felt the old pull and the memory of what we'd had. You mess with my family, you mess with me. Like I said, we're done. I turned for the door and threw it open, determined to leave. 7 armed guards blocked my path, standing there with cold purpose. I spun back to face Adrian, the realization of what I'd stepped into settling in my gut. I'm sorry, Lucas, but I can't let you leave, he said. I stood there, glaring and cursing myself for walking into this situation. I had always been a man of the law. I'd helped the police with difficult cases, followed procedure, done what was right. Somehow, I'd followed my heart into the bed of a criminal, and now, for the second time in my life, my heart had led me into danger. Maybe it was time to stop listening to it. I buzzed the guards, Marcus said from the side, and Adrian shot him a look. Mind your business, Mark, Adrian snapped, then turned back to me. You love me, Adrian said, voice softer now. I know you do. You can't throw away what we have over this. Call off your men, I repeated, steady despite the tremor in my chest. The wolves can handle themselves, he replied through gritted teeth. He was annoyed, but his annoyance did nothing to change my resolve. I swear, if Lakin gets hurt I will, I began, but I didn't finish. You know what? I'm tired of hearing about him, Adrian said, eyes glinting. I think it's time we paid him a visit. The words hit me like a blow. I froze, every instinct screaming that this could not end well. Chapter 8. Scotty's POV. Everyone was tense. If the situation hadn't been so serious, it might have actually been funny. I turned slightly in my seat, peeking through the gap to where Adrian and Lucas sat behind me. Lucas was pressed up against the window, earphones in, pretending to be deeply fascinated by the scenery outside. His jaw was tight, his right eye twitching every now and then, a sure sign that he was furious. Honestly, I couldn't blame him. Adrian was indirectly responsible for what had happened to one of Lucas's friends. He refused to call off his men, wouldn't let Lucas out of his sight, and even forced him onto the plane when Lucas demanded to handle the situation himself. Adrian had threatened to deal with Lakin without him, and that, unsurprisingly, worked. Now here they were. Lucas, silent and angry. Adrian, just as angry but for different reasons. Adrian was frustrated because Lucas had accused him of something unfair. Anyone would have been upset. But what made it worse was that Lucas couldn't stop mentioning Lakin's name every few minutes, and knowing how possessive Adrian could be, that had to sting. Then came the final blow. Lucas had broken up with him right when things had seemed to be going well. Personally, I thought Adrian could have easily called off his men, but he probably refused out of pride. Adrian hated being told what to do, especially by someone he cared about. Can you sit still for once? My older brother, Marcus, growled from beside me. When I didn't move fast enough, he grabbed my jacket and pulled me back to face forward. I shot him a glare. And there it was, the third person in our little group who was in a terrible mood. Marcus wasn't angry for any personal reason. He was just annoyed that Adrian had dragged all of us along to the States. And as usual, he took it out on me. Which, of course, made me angry too, because I hadn't done anything wrong. He always treated me like a kid. I was 23 years old, for goodness sake. How about you mind your own business and let me be? I muttered, glaring at him. Marcus turned his sharp eyes toward me, and just like that, I clammed up. He was already irritated enough. For the sake of my own safety, I decided it was best not to add to it. With a sigh, I leaned against the window, preparing myself for what was going to be a very long flight. Marcus POV. I just wanted this trip to be over. The two behind me were so quiet I could hear them breathing, and Scotty was fidgeting like a restless kid. This whole trip was a mistake. Nothing good could possibly come from it. Adrian was setting himself up for heartbreak with the man he called his lover, and now we were all stuck going to some remote, unfamiliar place, wasting time we could have used to strengthen our organization. Lucas said he called ahead. Scotty said suddenly, breaking the silence. Told the pack he was bringing a few friends. I don't think they know who we really are. I heard, I replied curtly. Apparently, that was all the encouragement he needed, because he immediately continued. Turns out the Alpha, Carson, asked Lucas to check into us. They don't actually know Lucas is dating Adrian, or what we even look like. Isn't that crazy? He said, voice filled with excitement. I sighed quietly. We'd all heard this already. Also, he went on, one of our men shot their beta weeks ago. The Alpha investigated and caught 3 of our guys. And they confessed right away. No loyalty at all. I heard, Scotty, I interrupted. You can stop repeating it. He glared at me briefly before mumbling something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like, stubborn idiot. I looked up at the ceiling and sighed again. It was going to be a very long flight. Adrian's POV. He was mistaken if he thought I'd let things fall apart so easily. Lucas and I weren't over, not yet. Not if I had anything to say about it. Scotty's POV. It took about an hour after landing, but we finally found our luggage and headed toward the exit. Everyone was still quiet, but I didn't mind. I was just relieved to be off that metal bird. I hated flying, and after that trip, I was perfectly fine never stepping onto another plane again. The airport here was completely different from the one in London. There was color everywhere, bright walls, cheerful signs, cozy snack stalls, and souvenir shops that gave the whole place a lively, welcoming feel. I couldn't help smiling. It was my first time in the US, and despite everything, I was genuinely excited. A girl we passed smiled at me, and when she winked, I grinned back. At least the people are friendly, I thought. He said he's out front, Lucas muttered after putting his phone away. Adrian only grunted in response. A few minutes later, we stepped outside the airport. Lucas led the way, with Adrian close behind him. Marcus and I followed. There he is, Lucas said, smiling slightly. I looked ahead and spotted 2 men. One leaned casually against a wall, while the other sat on the ground beside him, tracing patterns on the concrete with his finger. The one standing grinned when he saw Lucas and came forward, pulling him into a friendly hug. After a quick greeting, the man turned to us. Guys, this is Thomas, the PAX Beta, Lucas said. Thomas, these are my friends. Interesting. He still hadn't introduced us by name. Grady, Thomas called to the man still on the ground. The guy's head shot up as if startled. He stood, brushed off his jeans, and joined us. Grady, this is Lucas and his friends, Thomas said. For a moment, Grady just looked at Lucas, studying him silently, brows furrowed in concentration. Then finally he spoke. Thought you'd be taller, he said seriously. I couldn't help laughing, and to my surprise, Marcus chuckled too. I like you already, Marcus said, grinning. Even Adrian's lips twitched with amusement. We're the same height, Lucas muttered, clearly annoyed, which only made me laugh harder. Thomas slung an arm around Grady's shoulders, pulling him along. The car's this way, he said, leading the way without looking back. I don't think I like that one very much, Lucas grumbled. I patted him on the shoulder, still laughing. "Relax," I said. "You'll survive." And with that, I quickened my pace to catch up with our new acquaintances, wondering what kind of story we were walking into this time. Chapter 9. It was a time when werewolves and humans coexisted, though humans knew nothing of their presence. Each wolf pack carried the name of its alpha. When an alpha died without an heir, the pack name died with him. If he had an heir, leadership was passed down in turn. If no heir existed, the beta, the alpha's second-in-command, assumed leadership. Each pack was overseen by the council, a circle of elders who advised the alpha. Though their authority wasn't absolute, their influence reached far across the werewolf community. The wolf camp, hidden deep in the forest, was designed to resemble a regular human neighborhood, just in case any outsiders stumbled upon it. The wolves went to human schools, held ordinary jobs, and lived among people unnoticed. The camp was the only place they could truly be themselves, away from human eyes and judgment. Traditionally, homosexuality was forbidden in wolf culture. Members were expected to find mates and have children to strengthen the pack. However, that rule changed recently when both the alpha and his beta courageously came out to their pack, each having found their destined mate. The alpha, Carson, led one of the largest packs in the state. At just 19, he and his beta, Thomas, were among the youngest leaders in the country. Carson's mate was Lakin, a 17-year-old student at the same high school. Thomas's situation was unique. He was the first known werewolf to find a human mate. His best friend, Grady, who had once been unaware of Thomas's true nature and even harbored prejudice against wolves. But over time, everything changed, and now, their bond was stronger than ever. Lucas POV. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. My heart was pounding, my throat dry. It had been almost a year since I last saw him, and I had no idea what to expect. I'd always planned to visit someday, but only when I was sure I was completely over him. That way, I wouldn't have to deal with this very feeling, the tightness in my chest that came from unfinished emotions. When Adrian told me he was going to visit Lakin, I knew I had no choice but to come along. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't let Adrian face him alone. I didn't know what Adrian might do when he saw Lakin again. For all his faults, I knew one thing for certain: he would never deliberately do something that would hurt me. That thought gave me some comfort, but it didn't erase my guilt for how I'd acted earlier. Yes, I had been angry that he refused to call off his men. But ending our relationship out of anger had been impulsive, and now, sitting here beside him, I regretted it. I glanced at him from the corner of my eye. Adrian had been unusually quiet since we left the airport. He only spoke when Thomas's partner, Grady, addressed him directly. And that brought me to another issue: Grady. Last I'd heard, he was an immature, reckless human who wanted nothing to do with our kind. But from the way he interacted with Thomas, that part of him seemed long gone. He was lively, funny, maybe even charming in his own way. But he was loud. He hadn't stopped talking since we got into the vehicle, and for some reason, everyone seemed entertained by him. Everyone except me. Still, I had to admit, his confidence was disarming. But the cheerful atmosphere didn't last long. I knew it wouldn't. The moment our names came up, everything shifted. Corsetti, Grady repeated, eyes widening. As in the Corsetti family? I froze. Thomas tensed immediately, his hands gripping the steering wheel. Grady's expression changed, his earlier cheer replaced by visible fear as he turned his gaze to Adrian. And in that moment, I knew exactly what was about to happen. Thomas's POV. That was the only word that fit what I felt. Grady's wide eyes said it all. The disbelief, the dread. Sitting in front of him was Adrian Corsetti, the man connected to the very pain that had once haunted Grady's life. It wasn't Adrian who had directly harmed him, but his organization, his family's network, had drawn Grady into a world of danger years ago. The same world that had nearly destroyed him. Honestly, I had thought it strange when Carson told us Lucas was visiting, just 2 days after we'd asked him to investigate the Corsetti family. But never in my wildest dreams had I imagined Lucas would bring them here, and certainly not on friendly terms. The realization sent my thoughts spiraling back to the moment all this started, just a few days earlier. Flashback. Stop sulking, Thomas, Grady said, snatching a handful of fries from my plate. I'm not sulking, I replied, shooting him a look. Then what's that face supposed to be? He teased, raising an eyebrow. Before I could reply, Carson's phone buzzed. He answered immediately, something he rarely did at school. You have news? Where are they being held? I'm on my way, Carson said, his voice low and firm before ending the call. Everyone at the table went silent. We all knew what that meant, a pack matter. Grady, come with me, Carson ordered, standing abruptly. Grady and I exchanged glances, then followed. As expected, Lakin joined us, leaving the rest of our friends behind with curious looks. The moment we stepped through the school's front doors, Carson spoke without looking back. We're heading to camp. I didn't ask questions, just followed his lead, starting the car while Grady fastened his seatbelt beside me. What's going on? Grady asked quietly. We'll find out soon, I said, though my gut told me this was serious. 20 minutes later, we arrived at camp. Carson's car stopped near the holding rooms, a secure area where captured intruders were questioned. He turned to Lakin, his tone stern. Stay here. Lakin looked like he wanted to argue, but Carson's expression silenced him. I gave Lakin a small reassuring smile before following Carson inside. The air in the room was thick with tension. I could feel it immediately, the mixture of fear, anger, and danger. 4 guards stood watch, and seated around a small table in the center were 3 men, their faces pale and weary. And then I saw him, one of the captured men. Recognition hit me instantly. It was Paul, the man who had tried to take Grady's life the day I was shot. My pulse quickened. Whatever this was, it was bigger than we'd imagined. Thomas, Grady, I'm sure you know that I asked my team to continue the search for the man responsible for your injuries, Carson said, his voice firm and steady as it echoed through the silent room. I nodded quietly, but Grady seemed distracted, his eyes fixed on Paul with an unreadable expression. Well, Carson continued, after weeks of searching and chasing dead ends, we finally found him, along with these 2, in a warehouse not far from the school. They were recruiting more students and asking around for you, Grady. Carson shifted his gaze to the 3 men seated across from him. A bit foolish to stay in town, don't you think, gentlemen? The largest of the group, Paul, scowled and muttered something under his breath. Just wait till I... He was cut off abruptly when the guard standing behind him gave his chair a sharp kick, silencing him. They told us they received their orders from someone called the boss, who, in turn, answers to a leader based in London, the guard reported. Carson frowned. London? I didn't think this operation extended overseas. His tone turned colder. What's the leader's name? None of the men replied. The Alpha asked you a question, another guard barked. The man seated closest to Carson hesitated, his voice trembling. If we tell you, we're as good as dead. Carson stepped closer, his calm composure radiating quiet authority. If you don't talk, you'll still regret it, he said softly. Now, tell me what I need to know. You don't understand, the man in the middle suddenly cried out. Carson gave a brief nod to a nearby guard, who pulled the chair out from under the man and escorted him out of the room as he shouted and protested. Carson turned back to the remaining 2. Your friend won't be returning, Carson said evenly. If you don't start talking, you'll share his fate. I knew Carson well enough to recognize his tactic. He wasn't cruel, but he was deliberate. He was bluffing, trying to get them to talk. Paul remained stubbornly silent, arms folded and jaw tight. But when Carson's gaze shifted to the other man, he broke down. Words came spilling out in a rush. He revealed that the operation was being run by a man named Adrian Corsetti, along with his brothers Marcus and Scotty. Adrian was known in London as a powerful figure involved in illegal trade and dangerous dealings, someone not to be underestimated. Once the men had revealed everything they knew, Carson ordered one of the guards to call the authorities. Make sure they're found right where we caught them, he instructed. The police will find enough evidence to keep them behind bars for a long time. Carson was nothing if not thorough. When the room was finally cleared and Lakin entered, Carson turned to Grady. Adrian Corsetti, ever heard of him? Grady shook his head. They said he's based in London, Carson said thoughtfully. I'll call Lucas. If anyone can track him down, it's him. Our part ends here. Don't worry, Grady, Lakin added reassuringly. If anyone can handle this, it's Lucas. After they left, I turned to Grady. You okay? He took a deep breath. Yeah, just glad they caught them. But I doubt this is really over. I nodded slowly. He was probably right. It rarely ended that easily. I had a feeling that if Lucas went after this Adrian Corsetti, things might get far more complicated, but Carson was the alpha. I trusted his judgment. End of flashback. If Carson had known they were coming, he would have told me. Which meant this was a surprise, even for him. I reached for my phone, ready to call my alpha, but hesitated. The only reason I didn't pull over was simple. I trusted Lucas with my life. There had to be a reason he was traveling with them. I glanced into the rearview mirror and caught Lucas's eyes. He looked back at me helplessly. He knew what was coming. I shifted my gaze to the others. Marcus looked bored, Scotty's eyes flickered between me and Lucas with uncertainty, and Adrian was studying Grady with unnerving calm. Carson, we've got a problem, I said the moment the alpha picked up. Lucas exhaled deeply in his seat. Scotty's POV. I quickly realized that I didn't like the United States as much as I thought I would. The moment we arrived at what they called the camp, our vehicle was surrounded. Men with rifles stood alert while several wolves, shifted down from their human forms, growled low, circling us. It was far from a friendly welcome. We were pulled out of the vehicle, not too gently, and I saw Marcus struggling against one of the guards. The moment a weapon was raised toward him, Marcus froze, his fury simmering beneath the surface. Adrian, however, remained calm. His hands were tucked casually into his pockets, his expression unreadable, almost amused. Somehow, that unnerved me even more. Then my eyes landed on a man standing a few feet away. He was unarmed but commanded attention effortlessly. There was authority in the way he stood, feet apart, arms crossed, eyes sharp and calculating. Even without saying a word, he exuded power. He looked toward Lucas, who was now being escorted out of the vehicle. But to my surprise, the guards released Lucas immediately. No weapons aimed at him, no tension. It's been too long, Lucas, the unarmed man said, his tone calm but firm. It's good to see you, Carson, Lucas replied. So, this was the alpha. Carson crossed the distance between them and embraced Lucas like an old friend, patting his back with an easy familiarity that spoke of years of trust. Relief washed over me. If they were friends, maybe we were safe after all. I'd never been fond of guns, and being surrounded by them made my pulse quicken. But my relief didn't last long. Lock them up, Carson ordered suddenly, glancing back at us before turning away with Lucas. Before I could react, strong hands grabbed my arms, pulling me roughly away. Marcus shouted something in protest, and Adrian cursed under his breath, his patience finally snapping. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Thomas and Grady standing nearby, watching as we were taken away. Their faces were unreadable, neither angry nor sympathetic. So much for becoming quick friends, I thought bitterly. But what truly hurt wasn't the guns or the orders. It was seeing Lucas, our supposed ally, walking away with Carson, a faint smile on his face, as though none of this concerned him. My heart sank. This had all been a setup. Chapter 10. Lucas POV. I couldn't deny the rush of excitement I felt seeing my old friend again after so long. But the moment I watched the Corsetti brothers being taken away, the smile faded from my face. I turned to Carson, my expression serious now. The pleasantries were over. He noticed the change in my tone immediately. His hand dropped from my shoulder, and the friendly glint in his eyes disappeared. I suppose now would be as good a time as any for you to explain why you brought them here, Carson said. Let's go up to my quarters. After one last glance over my shoulder at Adrian and his brothers, I followed silently behind him. So, you're telling me you're in a relationship with a criminal, Carson said. His tone wasn't questioning, it was firm, disbelieving. From the look on his face, I knew he wouldn't easily understand. Come on, Carson, I replied, trying to sound calm. You, of all people, should know that you can't control who you fall for. I didn't mention that when I first got involved with Adrian, I hadn't realized how deep my feelings would grow. Carson shook his head, disbelief etched across his face. Lucas, wolves don't just fall for someone. Our mates are chosen for us, destined. And you're telling me you chose a man who's involved in crime? I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. Yeah, well, that's what happened. I fell in love with him, and now I'm here, trying to deal with it. It was the first time I had admitted out loud that I loved Adrian, and it didn't feel freeing at all. It felt heavy, final. Carson was silent for a moment. I shifted in my seat, glancing around the dining room. The place hadn't changed a bit since the last time I was here. So why bring him here? He finally asked. Are you trying to tell me he's changed? I shook my head. No. But I confronted him about what happened with Thomas. He swore he wasn't directly responsible. I hurried to continue before Carson could interrupt. He told me he gave his men orders to stand down early this morning, so no one should bother your pack. Carson leaned back, his expression unreadable. That still doesn't explain why he's here. On my land. This was the hard part, the lie. He wanted to visit, I said carefully. And I tagged along. The words tasted bitter, but it was the only answer I could give. Carson didn't seem convinced, and who could blame him? My story barely made sense. But to my relief, he didn't push further. So, you're asking me to let 3 known criminals walk freely in my camp? He asked, voice steady but cautious. I promise they won't cause any trouble, I said quickly. I'll make sure of it. Adrian might have a past, but he knows what this pack means to me. He wouldn't risk doing anything to jeopardize that, or us. You have my word. Carson exhaled slowly. You do realize his men have the camp surrounded, right? My eyes widened, but before I could reply, he continued, the only reason I haven't taken further action is because they haven't caused any trouble since they arrived. You knew about his men and still ordered his arrest? I asked, frowning. What if they had retaliated? Carson gave a faint, knowing smile. I had a dozen guns aimed at each of them. If they tried anything, it would have ended fast. But I think your mate was testing me, seeing how far I'd go. By letting me arrest him, he was showing that he meant no harm. He paused, then added, your mate's a clever one, Lucas. I'll give him that. Despite the seriousness of it all, I couldn't help but smile faintly. He really was. Marcus POV. If this wasn't all a setup, then why did Lucas let them arrest us? Scotty asked, his tone frustrated. Adrian, ever calm, answered him patiently. Think about it, Scotty. Werewolves protect their own above everything else. 3 known criminals show up at their camp unannounced. You really think they'll just welcome us in? Scotty frowned. But Lucas is friends with their alpha. He could have done something. I sighed. My younger brother had always been impulsive. Listen carefully, Adrian said evenly. In a pack, the rules come before everything. Before friendship, before rank, before reputation. It doesn't matter who you are. You break a rule, you face consequences. It's that simple. Scotty went quiet, absorbing the words. I pushed back from the small wooden table, pacing the length of the cramped holding room. We'd been stuck here for nearly 2 hours, and still no word from the outside. The air felt thick with tension. A single small window sat too high to reach, and the only door was likely guarded. It was about sending a message, I said finally, turning back toward them. Whenever we enter new territory, we gather local allies. It's how we show strength, that we're never unprotected, no matter where we are. Adrian nodded. Exactly. It was a calculated risk. The humans will probably think the wolves are real, not shifters. As for the pack, we knew they might react, but it was necessary. Scotty crossed his arms, still skeptical. And if Carson had attacked our men? He wouldn't, I said firmly. He has a pack to protect. He wouldn't start a fight unless he had no choice. Scotty scoffed. A fight? More like a slaughter. We barely have enough men out there to make a dent. I exchanged a glance with Adrian. Those men are a warning, not an army, he explained. But if things ever got that far, one call, and we'd have more than enough backup. We didn't build our reputation on empty threats. Scotty finally fell silent. The room grew quiet except for the faint hum of tension in the air. I hated waiting, hated being trapped. Wolves and their rules. The sooner Adrian ended this visit, the better. Lucas POV. Carson and I made our way toward the holding room. My chest felt tight. I could only hope none of the brothers did anything reckless. I had convinced Carson to let them go, but one wrong move could undo everything. You're seriously going to let them walk free? Grady asked, his voice filled with disbelief. I didn't particularly like Grady, but I understood him. His reaction made sense. Carson had told me everything that happened before his call a few days ago. Grady had once been caught up with local dealers, young, desperate, just trying to support his mother who'd fallen into addiction. It had led to tragedy, Thomas getting injured while protecting him. And that chain of events traced back, at least in part, to Adrian's organization. It wasn't hard to understand why Grady hated them, why he hated him. And standing there, listening to Carson and Grady talk, I felt that familiar ache of guilt tightening in my chest. For the first time in a while, I really began to question what I was doing. I loved Adrian, I knew that, but I couldn't ignore what his actions had done to others. The pain he'd caused, even if unintentionally, had consequences that reached far beyond either of us. Still, I couldn't let go. Maybe it was foolish, but I wanted to believe he could change. I needed to believe it, because if there was even the smallest chance for us to make it work, I had to try. Love, after all, wasn't supposed to be easy. How can you be in a relationship with that guy? He's a criminal, Grady said sharply, turning to me when Carson ignored his outburst. I faced him calmly. And you think that makes you any better? You worked for him once, didn't you? There's no such thing as levels of wrongdoing. You were involved too. Just because you left that life doesn't erase the fact that you were part of it. Grady fell silent immediately. His jaw tightened as he looked away, refusing to respond. As we continued walking, I noticed Thomas reach for his mate's shoulder, a silent attempt to comfort him, though Grady didn't react. His moods shifted faster than I could keep up, angry one moment, chatty the next. I still don't get why she grounded him, Grady muttered, clearly having moved on from the earlier topic. He missed curfew by 2 hours. Big deal. Thomas chuckled. Grady, you convinced him to go all the way to the city. You both came back over 2 hours late, and he didn't even call his parents. What did you expect to happen? Still, a curfew at 17? Midnight's too early. Grady protested dramatically, throwing his hands in the air. I couldn't help but laugh softly at his frustration. Who are you talking about? I asked, genuinely curious. Lakin, Grady said. His mom grounded him 2 nights ago. My heart skipped a beat at the name. I had been wondering when I'd finally see him again. Since my arrival, no one had mentioned him, and I'd assumed he would show up eventually. I glanced at Carson, who remained calm as always. Can't you do something about that, Carson? You're the alpha. Can't you just tell his parents to let him off the hook? Carson shook his head. I prefer not to interfere in family matters. That's between Lakin and his parents. I turned to Thomas. And you just let Grady take him to the city? Lakin makes his own choices, Carson said, stepping in before Thomas could answer. And Grady knows that if anything happened to him, he'd have me to answer to. I raised an eyebrow. That's new. When I lived here, you wouldn't let Lakin out of your sight. That's because you were living here, Carson said casually, and Thomas chuckled beside him. I rolled my eyes but smiled a little. So, when's he allowed out again? Tomorrow, Grady said quickly. I tried visiting him, but his mom wouldn't let me. Said I'm a bad influence. Can you believe that? He gestured dramatically. Thomas laughed. Grady, you don't look like a bad influence, you are one. Grady gasped in mock offense, folding his arms. That's not fair. Come on, Thomas said, tugging at his arm. Let's go home. I'm starving. As they disappeared down the path, I turned to Carson. Shouldn't Thomas be here when we talk to them? He has other responsibilities to handle, Carson said simply. When we finally reached the holding room, 2 guards at the door nodded to Carson and stepped aside. Inside, the mood was heavy. The dim light cast shadows across the room. A single table stood at the center, surrounded by 4 chairs. Scotty had fallen asleep, his head resting on the table. Marcus stood off to the side, arms crossed and expression hard, clearly unhappy. Adrian sat beside his younger brother, gently brushing Scotty's hair with his fingers. When we entered, both twins looked up, though Scotty remained fast asleep. "I was wondering when I'd get the chance to meet the famous Carson," Adrian said quietly, amusement flickering in his eyes. Carson regarded him with a cold, steady stare. "Listen carefully, Corsetti. I'm allowing you and your brothers to stay in my territory only because of Lucas. The moment you step out of line, that's it. You'll all be dealt with accordingly." Adrian stood, but Carson continued. "And one more thing, call off your men. We don't need armed guards wandering near the camp." "No problem," Adrian replied calmly. "Good," Carson said. "You're free to stay at the guest house. One of my men will show you the way." And with that, he left the room. I turned back to the brothers, unsure what to say. "Is he okay?" I asked, nodding toward Scotty. "He's just tired," Marcus replied, walking over to gently wake his brother. Adrian's gaze met mine then, unwavering. When he stepped closer, the air seemed to tighten between us. His lips curved slightly, and I instinctively took a step back. "Shall we?" I said, motioning to the open door. He nodded and walked past me. Scotty stirred, blinking sleepily. "We're leaving?" "Finally," he murmured, rubbing his eyes. There was something so innocent about him. It was hard to imagine he was part of Adrian's world at all. "Yeah," I said softly. "We're heading to the guest house." With Marcus following behind us, the 4 of us left the holding room and made our way down the quiet street toward our temporary home. Marcus POV. "Carson said someone named Rivers will bring us food soon," Lucas announced later, after we'd chosen our rooms and unpacked. "Who's Rivers?" Scotty asked, perched on the arm of a chair. "He used to be close to Thomas," Lucas said carefully, "before Thomas met Grady. Just a heads up, he's a little flamboyant." "Flamboyant?" Scotty repeated, amused. Lucas nodded. "You'll see what I mean. He's a great guy, just a bit expressive. Be nice, okay?" He shot a quick glance my way. I frowned. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Before I could say more, the doorbell rang. "That's probably him," Lucas said, standing to answer it. "I'm going for a walk," I muttered, already heading toward the back door. I'd had enough of werewolves for one day. Making small talk with one was hard enough. Doing it with a loud, overly cheerful one was definitely not happening. As I stepped outside, I heard a bright, excited voice from inside the house. It was high-pitched and full of energy. I winced. Shaking my head, I closed the door softly behind me and started walking toward the forest nearby. I needed some time alone. Chapter 11. Lucas POV. The silence was deafening. I kept glancing at him from the corner of my eye as he prepared for bed, but he didn't look at me, not once. We hadn't spoken a single word since we entered the room, and I found myself longing for even the faintest sound to break the heavy quiet of the guest house. Maybe a laugh from Scotty next door, or Marcus's deep voice returning from wherever he'd gone. Anything to cut through the silence that pressed on my chest. But nothing came. I was half-dressed, a blanket draped over my shoulders as I tried to keep warm. The wooden floor creaked under my feet as I crossed to the bed, wrapping the blanket tighter around me. When I finally sat, I turned my gaze toward him, my lover, standing by the window, still as stone. The moonlight framed his outline, his bare chest rising and falling slowly. "Aren't you cold?" I asked softly, desperate for conversation. He didn't turn around. He simply shrugged. That hollow ache in my chest tightened, the kind of ache I used to feel as a child when I fought not to cry after being scolded. I hated that feeling. And now it was back, because I knew I'd hurt him. I'd accused him, doubted him, and tried to walk away without thinking of what it would cost. I sat up straighter, the blanket slipping off my shoulders. "Are you coming to bed?" I asked quietly, and even I could hear the hesitation in my voice. He didn't respond for a while. When he finally spoke, it wasn't what I expected. How did it feel seeing him again? His tone was low, careful. I didn't need to ask who he meant. I haven't seen him yet, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He's still grounded. The tension didn't fade. It hung between us, thick and painful. 2 days ago, I had been ready to end it all, to throw away everything we had because he'd been indirectly tied to what happened with Thomas. I'd spent months trying to change him, asking him to alter his world to fit into mine. And yet, the one thing he ever asked of me, I couldn't give. Watching him now, I realized how unfair I'd been. How much he had endured for me. How much pain he had swallowed in silence while I held on to feelings for someone who wasn't even here. I used to think of him as unbreakable, the untouchable man everyone feared. I had convinced myself he couldn't feel pain, and maybe that had made it easier to hurt him without guilt. But now I knew better. He was human, and I had been blind. I stood, walked over to him, and gently wrapped my arms around him from behind. His skin was cool to the touch, and at first, he tensed. But I didn't let go. Pressing my forehead against his back, I whispered, "I'm sorry." He exhaled slowly, the weight of his breath fogging the window pane. "I love you," I said quietly, the first time those words had ever left my lips. He stiffened in surprise. "Lucas?" His voice trembled, unsure, almost afraid to believe me. "I'll let him go," I promised. "I'll let the past go." He didn't reply, and I didn't expect him to. He had every reason to doubt me. But I meant it. Tomorrow would be the first step in proving that. Adrian's POV. I shouldn't be here. There were only 2 ways this could end. Either Lucas would finally let go of his past and choose me, or he'd walk away for good. My heart begged for the first, but the part of me that knew pain expected the second. I hadn't come all this way to start trouble. Despite what Lucas thought, I wasn't here to harm the boy who still haunted his heart. I just needed closure. I needed him to choose, so I could stop living in this half-life where his heart belonged to someone else. Loving someone who couldn't let go of another person was its own kind of torture. When Lucas promised to move on, I wanted so badly to believe him. I wanted to believe that his heart could finally rest with mine. But deep down, doubt lingered. Love had changed me in ways I never imagined possible. I used to think I was immune to it, too hardened, too lost. But Lucas proved me wrong. He became the one thing I couldn't control, the one person who made me question everything I'd built. If he asked me to walk away from everything, I probably would. That terrified me more than anything else. Because even if he managed to move past Laken, I knew what would come next. His request for me to leave this life behind. And I wasn't sure I could. The thought of losing him tore at me, but so did the idea of changing everything I was. I turned, pulling him closer, wrapping my arms around him tightly as if I could absorb his warmth and make it last forever. God, I loved him. It felt like punishment and salvation all at once. And even knowing that, if I had to choose again, I'd still choose him. Every time. Lucas POV. Morning light filtered softly through the curtains, warm and peaceful. The quiet hum of a new day filled the room. I shifted under his arm, smiling when he groaned and turned away, his usual grumpy morning self. Last night's conversation lingered in my mind. For the first time in a long while, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted from my chest. The idea of letting go of Laken and focusing on what was in front of me brought a fragile kind of peace. "Stop moving," Adrian muttered, his voice muffled by the pillow. I laughed quietly. "Come on, it's almost noon," I teased, even though it was barely past 9. He mumbled something unintelligible and pulled the blanket higher. "Everyone's probably already up," I added, stretching my arms. He gave a non-committal hum. I rolled my eyes, smiling. Adrian was not a morning person. Unless there was strong coffee involved, his mood before breakfast was always a challenge. "I want to go see what I've been missing around here," I said, standing from the bed and heading for the bathroom. When I looked back, he was watching me, silent, thoughtful. His eyes held that same depth that always made my heart race. "Come back to bed," he said softly. There was warmth in his tone, an invitation that almost pulled me back. But I shook my head, smiling. "If I do, we'll never leave this room." He gave a tired grin, and I slipped into the bathroom, the sound of running water soon filling the space. An hour later, we finally made it downstairs, together. Marcus didn't even look up when we entered the kitchen. His focus was glued to the newspaper spread open before him. I had no idea what time he'd come back last night, but I knew better than to ask. He still couldn't stand me, maybe even more so now that he was forced to stay in a wolf camp. Scotty, as expected, was his usual bright self the moment he saw us. Sometimes it amazed me that we were the same age. I could never recall being that innocent. "The wolves are gathering," he said, eyes wide with excitement. "I saw a group running down the street earlier, and a few more passed by just now. I wonder what's happening." I grabbed a leftover piece of toast from his plate as I walked by and accepted the steaming cup of coffee Adrian handed me. Settling onto the stool across from Marcus, I took a bite and said, "They're probably heading out for a hunt." "I've never seen a wolf hunt before," Scotty said, sliding his still full plate toward me. "Do you think they'd let us join?" Marcus finally spoke, his tone flat. "You really want to chase after wild animals?" Adrian sat down beside me, quietly helping himself to what was left of Scotty's breakfast. "Why not?" Scotty teased. "Maybe I'll find my inner wolf." Marcus didn't react, not even a hint of a smile. He clearly didn't want to be here, and it showed in every sigh and every tight movement. "For the most part, they're friendly," I told Scotty. "They won't mind if we tag along. But if we want to go with them, we'll have to leave early." "You're actually going?" Adrian asked as I finished my coffee and stood up. "Yeah," I said with a grin. "I used to hunt with them when I lived here. It's an experience like no other, running alongside them." Adrian gave me a small smile. "All right, then let's go." Before long, the four of us were walking down the street toward the courtyard. Marcus, as usual, lagging behind. About 30 minutes later, most of the pack had gathered in the courtyard. Carson had already given his usual pre-hunt talk, and several wolves had already shifted and disappeared into the forest. The rest lingered, chatting, laughing, or waiting for others to join them. "It's incredible how many wolves are here," Scotty said in awe. I chuckled. "This is one of the largest packs in the state. What did you expect?" Adrian's arm rested loosely over my shoulders, and I leaned into him as we watched small groups take off in bursts of energy, transforming before they dashed into the trees. The courtyard was alive with excitement, and I realized how much I'd missed this. Children too young to hunt played under the watchful eyes of the older wolves. Their laughter filled the air, soft and infectious. I couldn't help but smile. "Marcus," Adrian called over, "why don't you put the phone down for a while? Enjoy this." Marcus had been on a call since we'd arrived, claiming he needed to handle business back home. "Rivers, over here," Scotty shouted, waving as someone approached. Marcus sighed, pulling the phone slightly away from his ear. "I'm going somewhere quiet to take this," he muttered to Adrian before walking off, already talking again as he tried to be heard over the noise. A moment later, Rivers appeared, dressed casually as ever. His shirt was crisp, his hair neatly styled, and his freshly manicured fingers glinted in the sunlight. "Hey, Rivers," I greeted, but he didn't respond. His attention was fixed past me, eyes narrowed, expression tense. "Rivers," I called again. No reply. "Rivers," Scotty said, louder this time, lightly touching his shoulder. He blinked as though breaking from a trance. "Oh, sorry. I thought I saw someone." He cleared his throat, glancing briefly past me again, then smiled brightly. "Never mind. So, what's everyone up to?" Scotty chuckled. "Just checking things out. Are you joining the hunt?" Rivers shook his head quickly, raising his hands to show his perfectly polished nails. "Oh no, sweetheart. I think I'll pass. I was thinking of heading down to the lake instead. You guys want to come?" I didn't answer right away. My attention had shifted to the two figures approaching from the edge of the courtyard. My heart skipped a beat before a smile spread across my face. "Oh, looks like Lakin's finally here," Rivers said cheerfully when he turned and noticed them. "Lakin. He was here." Beside me, I felt Adrian's arm stiffen. Chapter 12. Lucas POV. A bright smile spread across Lakin's face when he saw me. He quickened his pace, leaving Carson to follow more slowly behind. My breath caught in my throat at the sight of him. It had been so long since I'd last seen him. He looked older now, stronger. The boy I'd left behind almost a year ago had turned into a man. His cheeks were more defined, a faint stubble shadowed his jaw, and his dark hair had grown longer, curling softly at his neck. He stood taller, his posture more confident, his frame lean but built with quiet strength, likely from his martial arts training. But his eyes, those same deep, expressive eyes, still carried the warmth and spark I remembered. Seeing them again nearly broke me. Before I could even say a word, Lakin wrapped his arms tightly around me. The familiar scent of home, of memories, of everything we once were, washed over me. When he pulled back to look at me, his smile was still wide, bright, and genuine. "I can't believe you're actually here," he said, his voice overflowing with excitement before pulling me into another hug. I froze for a second, unsure what to say. I had imagined this reunion 100 times in my head, but now that it was happening, words failed me. I could only smile, caught somewhere between disbelief and relief. "I wanted to see you yesterday," Lakin went on, "but my parents wouldn't let me leave." "That's okay," I finally managed to say, my voice soft. "It's really good to see you, Lakin." Carson joined us, watching with quiet amusement. "You'd think you two would have plenty to talk about, considering how often you're on the phone," he teased. Lakin laughed, playfully nudging him. "Guess I'm just trying to take it all in." I chuckled awkwardly, glancing briefly at Adrian, who stood beside me, tense, his gaze locked on Lakin. "You've been working out," I said, trying to break the tension. Lakin grinned. "Yeah, I'm still training in martial arts. I actually enjoy it now." He looked at the people around me and added, "So, aren't you going to introduce me to your friends?" "Oh, right," I said, realizing I'd completely forgotten my manners. "This is Scotty." Scotty stepped forward, shaking Lakin's hand warmly. "It's great to finally meet you. Lucas talks about you all the time." Lakin laughed, looking amused. "So, you talk about me, huh?" I rolled my eyes. "Don't let it get to your head." He smiled again before turning to Adrian. "Then this must be Marcus? Or Adrian?" "This is Adrian," I said quickly. "Marcus is somewhere around here." "It's nice to meet you, Adrian." Lakin extended a hand toward him, but Adrian didn't move. His expression was cold, unreadable. After a moment, Lakin awkwardly lowered his hand, trying to mask the hint of hurt in his eyes. I nudged Adrian lightly, hoping he'd say something, but he stayed silent. The awkwardness in the air was suffocating. Lakin turned back to me, concern suddenly flickering across his face. "Hey, what happened to your neck?" I instinctively reached up. The faint bruise from last week's incident was still there. I'd almost forgotten about it. "Oh, it's nothing. Just a training accident," I said, brushing it off. But before I could step back, Lakin reached up gently, fingertips brushing the mark as if to make sure I was really okay. It happened in a blink. Adrian's hand shot out, pulling Lakin's hand away. "Don't touch him," Adrian said sharply, his tone low and tense. Lakin stumbled a little, caught off guard. Carson immediately stepped forward, steadying him before turning a glare on Adrian. The air shifted, suddenly thick with anger and misunderstanding. "Carson, wait." I tried to speak, but everything spiraled too fast. Carson's protective instinct kicked in, and Adrian's pride refused to back down. Words were exchanged, sharp and heated, their tones rising above the chatter of the courtyard. "Stop!" I shouted, stepping between them, but neither of them was listening. Then chaos erupted. Members of the pack, alarmed by their alpha's anger, began to crowd around. The tension in the air set everyone on edge. "Please, stop this." I yelled again, but before I could move forward, someone grabbed my arm. "Lucas, stay back. You'll get hurt." Rivers shouted, holding me firmly. I pulled away, pushing through the growing crowd until I reached Adrian, who had stumbled backward. I moved in front of him just as Carson raised his fist again. "Stop!" Lakin's voice rang out across the courtyard, desperate and trembling. He rushed forward, grabbing Carson from behind. "Please, stop." This isn't worth it. Carson froze, his chest heaving as he glared down at Adrian, then at me. Silence slowly fell over the courtyard, broken only by the heavy sound of breathing. "Take him and leave," Carson said finally, his voice cold and steady. Adrian, blood on his lip, met his gaze and replied quietly, "Gladly." "No." Lakin stepped forward again, his voice breaking. "Carson, please. Lucas just got here." But Carson didn't answer. His decision was final. The wolves surrounding us stayed still, waiting for their alpha's signal, but none came. Lakin tugged at Carson's arm, pulling him away and urging him to calm down. The two of them disappeared into the crowd, leaving the air thick with unspoken tension. "Adrian, are you okay?" Scotty shouted as he pushed through the others. Adrian brushed at the blood on his lip, wincing but refusing help. When he tried to stand, his knees wobbled, and Scotty and I caught him just in time. "Let's get you back to the lodge," I whispered, voice trembling slightly. "Please, just for now." He didn't argue. We turned and began to walk away, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on all of us. And as I glanced back over my shoulder, I saw Lakin watching. His eyes filled with regret, fear, and something else entirely. Something that made my heart ache all over again. Our path was still blocked by growling wolves who refused to move. No matter which direction we turned, they surrounded us, their eyes glinting in the dim light. Every time we tried to push through, snapping jaws warned us to stay back. My heart raced as I searched desperately for a way out. "Adrian! Scotty!" Marcus's voice echoed from somewhere in the crowd, but I couldn't see him. The chaos around us grew. The wolves crept closer, forming a tightening circle. "Marcus!" Scotty shouted back, but there was no reply, only the low, restless growls all around. The blood roared in my ears. My heart slammed against my chest. There were too many of them. What were we supposed to do now? Suddenly, a chilling howl sliced through the air. The sound was so powerful it seemed to shake the ground beneath our feet. The wolves whimpered, several lowering their heads as though submitting to an unseen command. Another howl followed, deeper, louder, and almost instantly, every wolf in the courtyard dropped low to the ground. My breath caught as silence fell over the chaos. That's when I saw it. A lone wolf stood tall on the platform ahead, its head lifted toward the sky. Its dark fur gleamed beneath the fading light. Adrian stumbled beside me, and I caught him, holding him steady as all movement around us froze. Then, before my eyes, the wolf began to change. Its form twisted and shifted, bones reshaping, fur receding, until, moments later, Thomas stood where the wolf had been, his posture proud and commanding. "Shift," he said simply. Immediately, the surrounding wolves obeyed, transforming back into their human forms, men and women standing silently, their gazes locked on their beta. "You are to stand down," Thomas said calmly, his voice carrying quiet authority. "No harm is to come to our guests." A visible wave of obedience swept through the crowd. My shoulders sagged in relief. When Thomas's eyes met mine, he gave a short nod and jumped down from the platform, making his way toward us. "Get him to the lodge," he ordered when he reached us. "I'll send the doctor." "I don't need a doctor," Adrian protested between shallow breaths, clearly in pain. The sound of his wheezing made me think he might have cracked a rib or two. We ignored his stubbornness. I gave Thomas a grateful nod. "How bad is he?" Marcus suddenly appeared beside us, his expression full of concern. He gently tilted Adrian's chin to inspect his face. Adrian flinched and looked away. "Come on, Adrian. Let's get you back," Scotty said softly. With one of us on each side, we helped him walk toward the guest house as quickly as we could. Hours later, after the doctor had gone, assuring us that Adrian had only sustained a few bruised ribs, a black eye, and a swollen lip, I sat alone in the kitchen, nursing a beer and trying to process everything that had happened. Marcus and Scotty had gone out to make arrangements for our departure from the camp. I had stayed upstairs with Adrian for a while, watching over him as he drifted in and out of sleep, numbed by pain medication. When Rivers arrived with a pot of soup and his usual calm presence, I finally stepped away. "How is he?" Rivers had asked. He'll be fine, I told him. He'd gone upstairs to check on Adrian himself and hadn't come back down since. Adrian's POV. Listen, sweetheart, Rivers said as he dabbed gently at my face with a damp cloth. I don't care how strong you think you are, you can't come into a wolf camp and attack the alpha's mate. You're lucky this ended with only a few bruises. I didn't reply. That didn't stop him from talking. He continued, his tone light but firm. And honestly, Lakin isn't a threat. He's completely devoted to Carson. He'd never do anything to hurt him or to take Lucas away from you. Lucas loves him, I muttered, despite trying to stay silent. Rivers smiled sympathetically, shaking his head. Of course he loves him, he said softly, and a dull ache spread through my chest. He must have seen it in my eyes because his voice gentled even more. Everyone loves Lakin, he continued, patting my hand kindly. He's easy to care about. But trust me, the way Lucas jumped in to protect you today says everything you need to know. I glanced up, unsure how to respond, but Rivers lifted his hand to stop me. I've known Lucas for a long time, Adrian. Back then, he would have done anything for Lakin. But the way he looks at you now? It's different. Deeper. He's in love with you, anyone can see that. So don't lose hope, all right? His words hit me harder than I expected. A quiet spark of relief and hope flickered in my chest. You need to make things right, Rivers added gently. Lakin didn't deserve what happened, and Lucas nearly got hurt because of it. You challenged the alpha in his own territory. That's not something easily forgiven. The sooner you apologize, the sooner you can move forward together. He was right, of course. I had let anger take control and nearly lost everything because of it. Thank you, I said sincerely. I really mean it. He smiled and stretched. Well, I'll let you rest now. And make sure you drink the soup later. I'll have Lucas heat it up for you. He turned toward the door, but I called out before he could leave. Rivers. He paused, looking back patiently. What about you? I asked quietly. Where's your mate? A faint, wistful smile curved his lips. When I find him, he said softly, you'll be the first to know. Then he was gone, leaving the room still and calm again. I leaned back against the pillows, exhaustion settling over me. My last thought before sleep took me was simple. I hope Lucas isn't too angry with me. Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.